everybody, and welcome here today. I am delighted to have with me, and we have Maria Harris. How are you? You okay?
Amazing, thank you. Good to see you.
Excellent. And then just mere days after the coronation, we have, and I'm going to tip my hat here. I am a Republican, but I know respect. Kate Faulkner, OBE. How I am delighted to have you on. How are you, Kate?
I'm all the better for seeing you, Simon.
There you go. Look at that. How was it? Was it exciting?
It was unbelievable, actually. I was very lucky. I met Prince of Wales, so also our future king. And he's very tall.
He's not like
he's short. He's 6'3", and I was like looking at the new, and he had to bend right down to put my medal on and everything. But they couldn't have been kinder, and he was. You can teach him to be like a gentleman, which he is, but there was a level of kindness and gentleness you can't teach, and that came across,
doesn't it? You can clearly see that, can't you? I think some people pull the wool over people's eyes, but they genuinely seem to have it. So great. Well, as I said, fantastic to have you on. We're here today to talk about similarly as important for the country the other day. We're here to talk about something that I think is anyone would agree is important for our own industry going forwards. The Home Buying and Selling Technology Group is what we're talking about. Now, this won't be a name on everybody's lips at the moment. That's intentional, and we're going to come into that in a bit more detail. But by the end of this, if you can't see the need for this, I would suggest you need to kind of pay a bit more attention, because it really is vital, isn't it, guys? This is dealing with something that I think everyone agrees is almost completely broken in our industry. And you people have been putting together groups of what they call it, interest groups, suppliers, and everything else to try and address it. To kick us off, who could just give us a brief overview of what we're talking about here, and indeed what the Home Buying and Selling Technology Group was built to solve the issue of?
Sure. So we've got the Home Buying Selling Group, and then you have specific groups in there, of which I'm the chair of the Home Buying Selling Group, and Maria runs the Technology Group. And the whole premise is extraordinarily simple. We just want to make home buying and selling better for the consumer. And that's as simple as it can be. But oh my word, that's a very complicated task, because weirdly, what's not broken is that lenders look after consumers well, so do brokers, legal companies, surveyors, agents. But what we don't do is we don't look after a first-time buyer and hold their hand from start to finish. There isn't a first-time buyer service. So if you kind of think of yourself running around a racetrack, the baton of that first-time buyer is passed from one sector to the other, and it's not always done in the best of ways. And we have to make that process more seamless. And we've got to talk to each other, which we didn't used to do. And we've got to like each other. And there's still a lot of agents that are not so fond of their legal company or surveyor, vice versa. And we have to get everybody wanting to serve the customer and pass them on from one sector to the other in the very best way and most seamless way possible. And the second thing we've got to do is we've then got to try and get the consumer to do everything they need to in the right order. And that is very simple to say in a matter of minutes. That is hugely difficult to do. And heading over to Maria, what's really tough is that there's so much data involved and information. So we have what we call the BASB, which is not a form, it's a buying and selling questionnaire. And we've identified 220 questions, up to 220 questions that somebody needs to know from the start to finish of buying a property to make the right decision. And that includes the consumer's questions, the lenders, the brokers, the surveyors, solicitors, etc. And that's where the technology group comes in. And I hand over completely 100% to Maria, because I'm not a technology buff at all. Because we have to collate all of the answers to those questions, and we have to collate that data. And that is the phenomenal work that Maria's doing.
Excellent. Well, you couldn't have a better tee up for jumping into a debate, could you there, Maria? So yeah, can you
Really.
Totally.
I mean, Kate's absolutely right. The thing is that I'm not a technologist either, and I don't claim to be any kind of technology expert, but I spent a lot of my time working in digitizing mortgage journeys for lenders and mortgage brokers and mortgage technology firms. And, obviously I got to design the UK's first digital mortgage from scratch, and which was amazing. It was an amazing thing to do, but it's one tiny little bit of that journey that Kate just described. And I think what I find really frustrating, having worked in other industries before I kind of fell into banking, is that other industries where you've seen digital transformation or consumer journeys, like consumer experience, really change, it's where data's been made available in a format that really works, and people have been able to design new customer experiences. And that's how things like Airbnb and Uber and Spotify and all this kind of stuff actually work, because data's available, it's in an open standard, it's in really good formats, and people then can design really lovely new customer journeys and plug in the solutions that they need. And we don't do that in our industry. So like Kate says, you go from someone finding their first home, or somebody looking to remortgage or raise finance to do improvements or whatever. There is no end-to-end customer journey map. There's no end-to-end experience. And we're not data driven at all. So when Kate and the guys at the Home Buying and Selling Group asked me, can we digitize the BASPI? How would we make that really work and make it interoperable? The first thing that jumped out at me was, we don't actually have the data to digitize this. We can make it electronic and we can turn it into readable, we can turn it into PDFs or whatever, but we can't truly digitize it until we fix our data issue and until we fix our collaboration issue. So that's something we've been working on for almost 2 years now, is trying to figure out the right places for where is the data, who needs to do what with it, what format do we need it in, and how do we get it into a state that we can start to build new customer experiences on. And it's huge, it's a mammoth task.
Well, you guys have been kind enough to invite a little old me in there. I'm certainly not a technologist, or unless ordering on Uber Eats and Deliveroo counts as that. I'm certainly also not somebody who has attention to detail. And having sat around those those digital rooms that you've had there, it is mind-blowing the amount of work you guys have had to do just to get it to this state. And I the reason I'm passionate and I've got involved with this is that it is absolutely, it's the right thing to do. You people throwing in, we'll come back to this time and time again. You're doing this, spending your own time there. Lots of other people are spending time all hours, night and day, to get this to the right point. And it is really exciting now, isn't it, that the fruits of those labours, that the fruits of that labour is coming to the fore now, and we're really going to start seeing some traction getting forwards. All the way through this talk, we're going to be, as we're bouncing around the questions, I'm going to keep reminding people, please get in contact with these guys, with the home buying and selling group, and ask them the questions, find out, have the ability to affect the conversation yourselves as well, because that's where the good stuff's going to be happening when we get traction, isn't it? I think going forwards.
Yeah.
Sorry, go on.
Yeah, you're right. I think that's what we want to do. We don't, everybody says we have members. We don't have any members. We call them participants, because we want everybody to get involved. And there's a lot. We've already got 140 people on a list when we do our invite for the Home Buying Selling Group. But sometimes people just need to dip in and dip out, and that's fine. But if you're passionate about something and you think you've got a solution, we don't think we've got all the answers. And we just love to hear from people. And now what we need to do is we need to start piloting some of the initiatives that we've come up with. And that's the big job, which is why we're reaching out to as many people as possible now.
So ostensibly there then, Kate, you're looking for trailblazers who have a passion to try and fix this, have an ability to, again, affect that conversation, tweak how it works at this stage. Because as ever, you get a lot of people who are clever after the event, Captain Hindsight people, who say, what was it done? Why was it done that way and everything else? Well, it's because, you didn't throw your two penneth in at the right time, isn't it? So, that, again, I will labour the point, but I'll just do it over the course of the next few minutes anyway. Can we just take one step back though, because I think you've identified a few different points there. But can we just summarize again, just to be clear in our minds, why? Because it's not just that the system is almost broken. It's actually got worse over the last few years, hasn't it? hasn't it? I mean, that dynamic about everything, whether it's, you know, the amount of time it's taking, withdrawals, everything else seems to be, maybe it's mirroring the wider economy, but it does seem to have hit a particularly sticky point. Is there a reason for that? Is
it's dead easy. So on average, we will do about 1.2 million transactions a year. That's what we'll do. If you take the first year of lockdown, and remember, we opened up 6 weeks in, 7 weeks after the first lockdown, and remember how scared we all were then. You know, just touching somebody could kill you.
Yeah,
and that was absolutely true. We were terrified.
Yeah.
But our market opened up. We opened up safely. We opened up with guidance that made sure that we had home moving guidance for the first time.
Yeah.
So with regards to the way we work, it's all about making sure that everything we do, if you're going to be successful at doing anything as a home moving industry, you've got to get agreement from everybody in the chain: lender, broker, legal company, agent, surveyor, and you goes there, and our removal companies that most people totally ignore moving home and who have one of the roughest times of everybody. So we've got to get all of those guys on board. Now, we can cope with 1.2 million homes being sold a year because that's what we're used to and that's what we're set up for. We went down to 1 million homes in 2020, but we didn't operate for 6 or 7 weeks. So that was squashed. Then you're talking about going up to 1.6 million homes and transactions. And because we're not digitalized, we can't create extra surveyors. We can't create extra legal companies. And for everybody that has a go at an agent, it's a qualified job.
Yeah.
We can't create people. And we can't pinch them from other services. So if you're going, and this year, I think the predictions are that sales might fall to 850. Well, how on earth do you run a home moving industry based on successfully and smoothly on 1.6 million households one year and 850 the next? The answer to that is digital, but we haven't got that yet. And that is the main reason. That, and you've got the issues with stamp duty as well, and the timings that gave, albeit that was extended, and there were a lot of people who worked very hard to get that done. So that is the reason. It's not that anybody's at fault as such. It's just that the work we were asking everybody to do meant they had to work 15-hour days.
Yeah, and that lack of digital is huge in that scenario as well, because when you think about, as we came in and out of various lockdowns, and the industries that had to move to working from home, to not relying on snail mail, to not having wet signatures, to not be able to do things face to face, all of the things that our industry is absolutely predicated on, for us to make that shift to even to be able to move those things online was Herculean an effort to get that up and running, and not sustainable and not scalable. So we've had, you know, all of these issues with lockdowns in and out, and then with huge spikes of transactions, and then things like Royal Mail strikes and other strikes and all of this kind of stuff. All of these different points that have just contributed to things that are just not sustainable or scalable in a digital world, because we're working with analog tools and in analog ways of working.
Yeah. So that phrase digitization, which is often thrown around, everyone kind of, I think, gets it intrinsically, you know, what you're trying to do, but where you start is an entirely different process, isn't it? It's just so hard to actually put that into practice. How much did you guys, you know, look around the rest of the world to look at obviously what's working, not working elsewhere, and able to translate that over here, or was it always clear what needed to be done? Because I'll be honest, you know, when we did a lot of business in Australia, and whenever I've been lucky enough to have our friends from Australia come over us, and then you get round to the inevitable chat, doesn't it? And it actually doesn't even matter if it's Australia, does it? Any part of the country, any part of the world come over, and they literally do that kind of sideways nod of the head, don't they? They just can't get it. What kind of out of industry, out of the country elements were you able to take when you were reviewing this whole process?
So we have had looks at, and people have got research that looks outside of the country, but I don't think anybody's got, I mean, my background's food. Right. And when I came into the property market, I was going to solve everything. It was going to be dead easy, blah, blah. And then I thought, wow, threw my marketing book away, threw my sales book away, threw my business process book away. The way that we do property deals is very different to others. And there's another factor that makes it really, two factors, I suppose, that make it really hard. And the first one is people here are so unbelievably driven by passion and fear to some extent. Fear of buying and property market going under, fear of getting a mortgage and fixing when they shouldn't have fixed, fear of losing out that house because we have such a shortage of stock, fear that they might never get that house. So we have, I always say, one of the things I have done is convinced the government, please don't think of policies that require rational thinking, because anybody that deals with a buyer, even myself when I'm buying, we aren't rational.
Out the window.
So we don't do rational thinking. So you can't explain to somebody why it'd be good to spend 300 quid on an upfront information pack that will make their moves smoother, because they're like, well, what if I don't sell? And then what happens is we don't have a media that's kind to our industry. They want to put out, they believe, I think, bad property stories sell papers, not the good ones. So if you look, my background's food, you look at how the media works with the food industry, the car industry, the health and beauty industry, lots of magazines. And on the one side, it'll have top 10 tips, or here's a brand new product, which is fantastic because, and then it'll have an advert next to it. And I had a big chat with one of the big magazine companies and senior person there. And she said, that's why I can't do good advice on property, Kate, for consumers, because there's no money to back up that advert like the other industries. So we're kind of on our own. And we've got to do the work ourselves to get consumers on board, because the natural education that you get of consumers in other sectors doesn't work in our sector. And in fact, worse than that, it puts people off. So I know any new product that comes out, you've just seen it with the Skipton Building Society, how many people have had a go? You know, you'd have top 10 reasons to do it, pros and cons, and you'd have a balanced argument. But no, people have piled in, what a dreadful idea, and other people are piling in, what a fantastic idea, and the consumer's not being educated at all.
No, and you keep coming at this, don't you? Is that the key raison d'etre here is to think about the consumer. You spoke about it off camera. Unite behind the consumer, I think, is a wonderful message there, isn't it? To get that.
Yeah, and that's what we have to do, because you can't just make decisions for consumers based on lending. You've got to think about, how does that affect a broker? How and the consumer interaction with that broker, and the consumer interaction with that agent. And a good example of this, and not, I completely understand why legal companies did it during COVID, is simultaneous exchanges and completions. Seemed like a really sensible idea, unless you're the removal guy and the family at 4 o'clock. And I know everybody worked super long hours during COVID, but at least you went home at night. The removal guys don't get to go home. And they can't put their kids to bed. And I know that's like tearing at the heartstrings a little bit, but that's why that's one of the big things that we have to change, is we have to make sure that we look after our fellow colleagues from lender through to removal, and think what that decision will have. It might seem right for the consumer, but is it right as far as the whole moving process is concerned?
Very much get away from that whole them and us, isn't it? The lazy kind of critiques about conveyancing and vice versa and everything else there. No one's moving forwards unless we solve this together.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the one thing why it has taken so long to get us to an implementation point, is that we have to get everybody working together, and they didn't. So what you used to have was government meetings, and quite right, the government did these, and they say, let's improve the home buying and selling process. And they bring everybody in and they go, you're there to represent your members. Well, I'm like, you're not here to represent your members. You're only in this room because you're representing the consumer. And if it's not, that's going to cause a problem for your members. Let's find a solution so we can deliver to the consumer and we can deliver to you. And now what we've got is we have everybody working together, and all the trade bodies, redress, ombudsman schemes, regulators, and they're all trying to get this process right for the consumer. And we've also built a great relationship with DLUC, Government's not getting much praise at the moment, but I can't fault, and I don't think any of us can, the support that we've had from DLUP. We're in regular touch with them. They've supported the initiatives. We've helped them with things they needed and vice versa. So we've got government and a good part of the home moving industry working together. We think we've got a way forward now with lots of initiatives, and now's the time to get everybody else on board to tell us what's right and what's wrong. But the only way we can do that is through implementation. But again, we have to get a lender, a broker, an agent, a legal company, a surveyor, search company, and a removal company all working on that project together. That's not easy.
I said to you it was like herding cats, and I think we ended up in terms of saying it's, if only it was herding cats, it's more like herding a zoo, because you've got so many different competing creatures, as it were, obviously sometimes with actually almost conflicting sorts of aims and targets, and you've got to look at the big picture at the end of that. Trying to get them all going in that right direction is the difficult thing. I think the thing that I did love about it is, though, actually the people you got within this group, you know, somebody said who was the rat. Well, the only one that was the rat, really, the people that are just looking out just for commercial gain for themselves. Because I think you've said some of those people might have, like, you know, expressed an interest and thought that there's more money to be made, and they quite quickly bounce out, don't they? Because it's very clear that actually, again, this long-term vision in terms of what you're aiming. It's not really going to be of their interest to them, is it? Because they can't, you know, it's only going to cost them.
Absolutely. And the reason it does is that anybody that's working with us has to put in a heck of a lot of time and resources. Now, that might be but those are people that run independent agents, and it's just them, and an independent legal company and an independent surveyor. But they care so much, they're willing to put their time into this because they know we've got to do it. And that's what we've got now. We know this has got to be done. We think we've got a way through of getting it done, but now we need to test it with everybody. And that's why it's taken a while to do, because the job has just been huge to get us, everybody in that zoo, going, okay, I'm not going to eat you today. I'm going to put my arm around you and I'm going to help us to look after that consumer. And that takes a little while because it is conflicting. You know, a surveyor's job is to go in and work out what's wrong with the problem. That's not what an agent wants to hear. And it's not really what the buyer and seller wants to hear either. Poor old surveyor, they get wrapped with whatever they do. So there are conflicting interests, but there's never a conflicting interest if you're all working on behalf of a consumer. And that's the bit to unite, and people do. And if people wanted to come in for commercial interests, I'm afraid they lose interest very quickly, because it's all about the consumer. And that's what we care about.
I think that's really good to just summarize again there. And so who at the moment, you can talk about who's actually involved in the home buying and selling group at the moment?
So we have the majority of the trade bodies. So that'll be people like Property Mark. That'll be the likes of RICS and also RPSA, which are on the surveying side. You've got quite a few on the legal side, and I think that might shock people when you start adding you need everybody in as well. So you start adding, you've got the Law Society, you've got the Conveyancing Association, but then you've got a lot of regulators and redress, and then you've got ombudsmen, so PRS and the Property Ombudsman. So then you start adding in the financial side, and you start adding everybody up together, and that's our kind of steering group. So there's about sort of 20, but that's about 20, 25 people and organizations involved. And again, we've got to get them moving in the same direction, and we've got to get them to agree to any initiative that we want. And then they meet 4 times a year as a steering group. And then we've got the home buying and selling group, of which they belong to, but then we invite those people who are actually working in the business. So nothing we have created has come from an ivory tower. I get that. I understand it. And it's been passed through somebody that's a legal company who just runs their own business, a franchise, or a corporate. So we try and work on all of the models, because I know how important that is to make sure it works for everyone. So
not to get tailored into one particular aspect of it. And
exactly. And because corporates run differently to franchises, run differently to what an independent person, how they would run their business and what they can cope with, versus the resources of a franchise versus the resources of a corporate. So everything we do has to pass the will this work for the trade bodies based on regulations, based on redress, everything else? And then, will this work commercially? Can this be implemented by everybody, whatever size job you do on the ground? It has to pass those tests. And that can take up to a year to get everybody on board with.
I can imagine. And how's it structured? How's it funded? You know, obviously there's lots of people there. So just talk us through. Obviously, you've spoken about the quarterly meetups and the steering committee and everything else, but what is the structure of the group itself?
Okay. Yeah, so we have 8 meetings a year.
Yep.
4 of those are with the steering group. And the kind of decision was, well, we need to cut it down from 140 to make decisions. So we say, right, okay, what's an initiative we would like to do? For example, the BASB. Yep. So although that was created beforehand, for us to go ahead and invest time in that would have to be agreed by all the trade bodies, redress, regulators that we work with. And then that would then be passed to the commercial guys on the home buying and selling group to say, we want to introduce this. Does this work for you too? Where have we gone wrong? Help us create those questions. Those 220 questions on the BASB, they didn't appear from anywhere. They weren't 3 people sitting in a room. They've come from hundreds of people in the industry coming up and saying, we need to know this, 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 and this. So that's how it's structured. We have our steering group meetings to decide what we're doing next, and then reviewing something that an initiative we've been looking at, like the BASB, for example, or property packs, whatever it might be. Then we pass it to the home buying selling group for approval and for them to check out. And then we would go ahead and say, right, let's work out an implementation plan. I think Maria's probably has been best at doing this actually as well, with the work that she's been doing.
I'm just going to apologise. My next door neighbours having building work done, and they've just decided that they're going to start drilling really, really loudly on the wall right next to this one. So tell me if it gets distracted.
That's absolutely fine.
And we'll get that in the home buying and selling group as well. We'll try to be chatting and somebody will drill. How rude.
Yeah, bring the builders in. So yeah, I mean, I think that obviously I've been a participant with the home buying and selling group since the beginning, and I did it originally with my lender hat on, and because I was working at Acton Bank and designing this digital process, and I wanted to engage with other people in the industry to say, we've done this amazing thing, and how do we hook it all together? And then quickly realised that it doesn't hook together. But also when I was at Acton Bank, we were part of the first digital street project with land registry and kind of helping design what the future of property data in the UK looked like, and how we started connecting things together. So the technology working group's been going less than 2 years. I think we're about 21 months in. I chair that. I am a volunteer. I don't work in the property industry. I have no commercial enterprise at all. Like, I literally do this on the side of my kitchen table and try and fit it around my client work and my non-exec roles and, you know, my day job. But I do it because that genuine passion to make the industry better. And just to use your zoo analogy, which I thought was absolutely hilarious, but also very, very true. There's a whole thing about people changing and adapting and getting that culture and mindset differently, because at the moment we really don't have that. We've got very siloed still. We still don't really collaborate all that well. We don't solutionize together collectively and create things that work across ecosystems. So that's what the technology group is trying to do. And I'm really fortunate that I get to chair it. But I think it actually helps that I don't have a vested interest and that I get to be very neutral. And, you know, because I came from a banking background, I was part of the team who did open banking for neobanks.
You said that to us offline, didn't you? What you've managed to do with open banking, you're now trying to recreate over here as well, which is a great analogy.
Yeah, so when you were asking about where do you look for inspiration and where have we looked to see like what works in other jurisdictions or what works in other industries, so there's lots of other industries where digitization of customer and user experience has really worked well, like retail, hospitality, health, all those kind of industries. And then you've got other countries who already do property packs and digital upfront information, and where their land registries are already on blockchain and on kind of really strong data platforms. So we've looked at all of those as examples of like what's worked well, where were there teething problems, what were the barriers to adoption. But yeah, the whole open banking process, albeit slightly different because obviously it was a directive from the Competition Market Authority. The people who were involved in it didn't really have a choice. It was an implementation entity to set up. But open banking and open digital identity trust framework are both really good examples of where you take a process, work out how to digitalize it, wrap a trust framework around it, put all of the standards and technology specs and everything that you need in that makes it trustable, and then you roll that out to market. So open banking, when that was being set up, they had an implementation team just to set it up. That was a team of 150 people. I think the budget was about 80 million over 2 years. And I'm literally sat doing this at my kitchen table for free. So I mean, I'd like to try and describe just, I mean, I'm not even trying to eat an elephant. I'm trying to like even fit the elephant into the zoo. It's just, it's mind boggling. So the fact that we've done any of this and managed to get any traction in 22 months is just testament to how hard people are working for free and how many organizations have come and sat at my kitchen table with me, helped me to do this, helped me to understand it. And we've got one-man prop tech startups right up to FTSE 100 big technology companies who've all helped to design that framework. They've contributed to it. They've tested the standards in their own systems. And now they're working on that process of how do we adopt this into live. It's a really small group of people. So as Kate says, this, you know, this big call now is we need the rest of the industry to come and do this. People keep telling us it's broken, but here's a solution, but it's only going to work if you all actually jump on board and you all change.
That's really helpful to understand. And what are the key initiatives that are going to be impact on home moving now? Because of course everybody just wants stuff deliverable straight out of the box.
Absolutely.
What's realistic in terms of the expectations going forward? You've had all this fantastic time, all this passion, people putting in free time, energy, and everything else. What do you think the tangibles are going to be over the coming months and years?
So it's a really good question, and what I'm trying to do is make that easier to explain what we're up to, because I think a lot of the time it's in our heads and we don't always get the message out. So what we're working on at the moment is we've listed out how home moving works now, with lots of experts, etc. What we've then said, okay, what can we change? So for example, we've said to dealer, look, we need you to announce at least the mandating of upfront information. And the reason for that is say, for example, voluntarily, you've got a chain of 3 homes. All the companies who are looking after 2 of those homes said upfront information's the best thing since sliced bread. Let's do it. But the 3rd one doesn't. Guess what? Everybody's going to say, well, that didn't work, did it?
Yeah.
So we've explained to the government, look, it's not like buying a toaster. Please don't think buying a home is like buying a toaster, or it should be. We've got to get everybody on board, and we have to get them to invest to do that. So, but even saying they're going to mandate it, if we can get that, that will help to get everybody started. But the other things that we can do, we've got the buying and selling guides, and we worked with the government initially on those. We're hoping, you know, like the how to rent guide has to be signed off. It would be amazing if we could get everybody on board in the industry to say, right, we'll go out with the home buying and selling guides to make sure that all consumers are getting the consistent information, because that's critical. There's a lot of conflicting information that we have. And the big one will make it 6 to 8 weeks difference potentially, is anybody that's selling a property, instruct your legal company day 1 of marketing. I've always personally done it, and it's made a big difference. And you don't have to worry about buying your next property then. The second thing is I would like to see is I don't think buyers should be viewing properties unless they've had their affordability approved. Partly because if a buyer goes to a mortgage broker, talking about that first time buyer having their hand held throughout the process, they're going to have their hand held, and they're going to be helped through the process right from the start. And brokers do an amazing job of doing that. And finally, my big one, which is taking a long time to do, I want everybody moved by 1 o'clock on day of completion.
I love that. I love that as an aspiration. As a really, you talk about the consumer again, that's something they can hang their hat on, isn't it?
Yeah. And it didn't come from me. The removal companies asked for it. And I went, why not? Why don't we do it? Well, I'm finding 50 reasons why that can't happen, Simon. And I think everybody thought, oh, we've given her 50 reasons. She'll drop that one now. I ain't dropping it. I'm working through every single one of those reasons, and we are going to solve the problem. And interestingly, chatting to people, a lot of them don't realise further up the chain that nobody's moving at 1 o'clock in the afternoon. It's 4 or 5 o'clock and the harm that's being done. it's all down to communication.
Adding a huge level of stress. I mean, I know, having been through it myself, and the conversation comes out with friends, family, and whoever. That is a real dynamic, and it's only because we do it so rarely, don't we? We do
Yes.
this moving game, that it doesn't become a bigger issue, and actually it isn't focused on, I think.
Yeah, but it's down to daft things. So people don't know, talking about open banking, people don't know they can't suddenly transfer 50 grand the day before completion. No. That could take 5 days to do. So it's little things like that. So we've uncovered all the reasons why it doesn't happen. Now we've got the job of persuading everybody to make the changes so that we can get everybody moved by 1 o'clock. And those are the things that we could do today, tomorrow, that will make a difference. And then Maria's on the future.
I was going to say, yeah. Well, that's the reality. That's the exciting short-term vision. What about the future, Maria? What does that hold for us?
So, I mean, as Kate said, the collaboration that we've had and the conversations that we're having, not just with DLUC, but with land registry, with geospatial, with local land charges, with all of the people who are custodians of where this data that we need, where they all sit. And we've had absolutely fantastic engagement on all of those. So there's a big push now. There's a national data strategy that was published in 2020. And that national data strategy talks about how data should be stored and how it should be structured and how you use it to digitize a process. And that's called fair data. So anybody who's at all interested in data, go and read about national data standards and read what fair data principles are. So we've had land registry have already publicly committed to moving to fair data principles and by 2025, and starting to digitize things like title deeds and start to work on this big warehouse of documents that need to be converted from paper and PDFs into actual proper data. And now we're working with the other government departments to say, how do we do that? So we will get to a point naturally, whereas these things start rolling off and that data becomes available, while industry are then working on adopting data standards, data dictionaries, common data schemas, connecting our connectivity via whether that's API or via a network or whatever way you want to do it, actually doesn't really matter. As long as everybody does it to the same spec and the same standards, you start getting to a point where actually the experience of having data flowing from the customer right at the beginning to the person moving at the end becomes really seamless and really powerful. And then you can add all sorts of amazingly interesting things into that. So you start giving customers control and transparency and being able to choose what day they want to complete and what time they want to move, but also to be able to do things like pre-get all of their utilities turned on in their broadband, so you don't spend your first 3 days sitting in your house on the floor going, I'm running this off my phone and having a hotspot. Like all of those little things, like they can all be improved once we crack this like infrastructure of having the data. And then I can get really excited about all the amazing things we can start doing with property data and energy performance and being able to like tell Amazon what time they can fly drones over and letting people park their cars on that, am I charging that on the hours that I'm, and giving me that energy back. Like it's absolutely like the future of this, really, really exciting. But we have to fix our data and we have to fix our connectivity, and that means we have to work together and corral ourselves around common standards, common language, common ways of like sharing data.
Just to analogy again, it's like, it's like creating the foundations of a good home, isn't it? At the moment, it's built on dodgy foundations, so everything about it is obviously is fragile or can fall over. And if we can get that bit right, all this other stuff, this good stuff can happen. And I think there's just on a wider point as well, is there's no doubt at all agents, anyone involved with property gets collateral damage from these issues that are around the system. There will be a halo effect, won't there, if we manage to start sorting this out, that again, the agents will be seen as the deliverer of the dream, of the move, of everything else there, rather than owning the issue as it is at the moment, whether that's right or wrong.
Yeah, and we create our own problems, not intentionally. It's nobody's fault, but we create our own problems because people basically make offers on properties that they don't have enough information for. And then the lender has to go and search for stuff, and then the search company, and then the surveyor has to go. We should have the majority of the information up front. So with those BASPI questions, in terms of how will it make a difference in the future, imagine you kind of press a button and you open up your property logbook, for example, and that fires off to the agent everything they need to know about that house, what work's been done, what planning permission, building certificates. An offer comes in based on understanding what's happened to that house and what they're really buying. You press another button and they've made their offer, it's been accepted. That information is then just fired off to the legal company, and then fired off to the lender and fired off to the surveyor. That is the dream. There are 220 questions we may need an answer to help you in various forms, to help to buy a home successfully throughout the process. We want to make sure you can press a button and every single one of those questions can be answered at a press of a button. That's when we remove fall throughs. That's when we really seriously speed up the process. We can do some of it manually now, instructing that legal company to do that upfront information from day one of marketing, not waiting until you've got an offer. There's 6 weeks, 8 weeks potentially. And we can do that now, but the future is pressing buttons and data looks after you.
All of these little iterative improvements famously will build up to the big results, won't they? So that's great. I mean, I'm absolutely on board with this. So what do you need? Let's culminate with the following. What do you need the industry to do to then improve this home buying and selling? Is what we're about now getting the suppliers and people involved, talking to you guys? What do you need from us what's the message out there to people?
So from my side, we want people that would love to get everybody moved by 1 o'clock. Tell us why you can't. I think I've got all of the answers, but you never know. There might be more out there. And if you're doing it, tell us how you're doing it. Okay. With regards to how can we get everybody instructed day one of marketing with a legal company? Can you do that? Can you just ring all your clients selling tomorrow and say, look, we think it's right to get instructed by a legal company. And if you can't, tell us what's stopping you from doing that. Yeah. So how can we do those things? Have a look at the BASPI, have a look at all of the questions that you need. And then really, again, over to Maria, because this is where this is a good thing. Maria's not working in one direction and the home moving process working in another. We're working in tandem. So from Maria's side of things, it's having people that can help pilot the data side of things. That's when I finish, because Maria has to take over because I go blah, 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 data.
Well, I guess for agents, if you are not already using any kind of upfront information, start with something, because having any upfront information is better than having none. So start with that and instruct the conveyor on day one is a really good way to at least get title checks and anti-money laundering, and like Kate says, all those things that speed up the process started. If the software that you're using, so your CRM system or case management system, whatever you're using in your business, doesn't currently support upfront information, start banging the door and asking for it. You're paying your license to use that software, and if that software doesn't support upfront, you need to start asking for it, because nobody's going to build it if they don't think there's a demand. If your software company can't build it, or it's not, or they don't want to do it for whatever reason, go and find companies who can do that for you. There are third parties out there who have built upfront information collection tools, who've built property packs, who've built property logbooks, who can start supporting some of these things. And even though it's not the most, beautiful journey, it's clunky and it means that you're getting your information in 2 places. Again, it's better than having no information. So we need customers to start knowing that they need it, and we need agents to start either using the tools or demanding from their software that they get the capability to do that.
That is wonderful, guys. I think, honestly, I mean, I knew a little bit about it because I've obviously been involved there, but I think hearing it so succinctly and and the clear vision that you've got for this is the thing that gives me the most optimism I've heard for some time now, that there is actually light at the end of the tunnel. If I was to just summarize this again, is really the takeaways for me are: the more preparation that buyers and sellers do prior to marketing and viewing the home, the more likely a sale or purchase is going to go through. Fairly obvious point there. Getting sellers to instruct legal companies day one of marketing can wipe weeks off the buying and selling process, of course, there. And finally, needing everyone to ensure that they can move by 1 o'clock in the afternoon to take away stress on the completion day is ultimately looking out for that consumer, which is the bit you started us off all with, isn't it? That's the case. Look, guys, I think from my point of view, get involved. We'll share this about across all. Please, we'll put all of the details out there, whether that's on the LinkedIn side, go via our, obviously, the group on our kerfuffle.com, or go to the main website itself. But do get involved, because this is too important to remain quiet on. Maria, Kate, absolutely enjoyed today. Obviously, it goes without saying we want to have you back as well to talk, look in more niche aspects of this, and maybe to talk to a few agents and get their views on some of the thoughts that are going on.
Would love that. Really would love that. The only thing everything we've done is because we listened.
Yeah.
We've not imposed anything on anybody. We've asked the questions. Why are the fall throughs? Why, etc. And that's where all the ideas have come from. They've come from the industry.
Brilliant. Kate, OBE, thank you very much. Maria, soon to be an OBE, I'm absolutely sure. This one. Simon Whale would probably have to say no anyway, even if I ever got.
We'll find a medal for you, Simon. Don't you worry.
Thank you both. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much. Cheers now.
See you soon.